This week on Personally Speaking, our guest is Siobhan Fallon Hogan, great actress and writer and comedian. She will have you in stitches. Stay with us on Personally Speaking. Hello and welcome to Personally Speaking. I'm your host, Monsignor Jim Lisante, and Siobhan Fallon Hogan joins me now. Siobhan is a longtime comedian, actor, and writer for film and stage. Her 35-year career has included iconic roles in Saturday Night Live, Men in Black, Seinfeld, and Forrest Gump. Siobhan is also a devout Catholic mom. She draws upon all these vocations for her latest feature film, which is called Shelter in Solitude. Shelter in Solitude centers on a death row prisoner and his unlikely friendship with a prison guard played by Siobhan. Shelter in Solitude was released in theaters across the country in October and is now streaming on several platforms, including Amazon.com, Amazon Prime, YouTube, and Apple TV. Siobhan Fallon Hogan has been married for 32 years to Peter Hogan, producer of her films. Together, they have three adult children, Bernadette, Peter, and Sinead. She's here with us today to talk about her film, her career, her family, making it in Hollywood as a woman of faith. Joining me now, I'm so pleased to welcome on our program, Siobhan Fallon Hogan. Siobhan Fallon Hogan, I need to ask you, what part of Italy does your family come from?
They're from the boot. They're from the boot. The part
I'm really intrigued. We had Estelle Parsons on a while back, and I said to her, you have a Norwegian background. What does being Norwegian mean for you? And she said, it's probably responsible for the alcoholism in the family. So what does it mean to be Irish American for you?
Honestly, I am so happy I'm Irish American because, my family stressed storytelling and humor. I'm not sure which order
Right.
that came in. I think it had to be a funny story. So, it was such a huge part of my, I think of a quilt, like it's every thread of my
Mhm.
being with the Catholicism, the other, like each thread is intertwined. And, because when we were kids, there was five of us, four girls and a boy, and I was a terrible student. And it really wasn't my fault. It's just because that's half of my brain really didn't work, math and science and that kind
Right.
of thing.
I relate.
And when I
Yes.
went to Lemoyne College, I remember getting a D my first semester in astronomy because I think you had to take a science. And I thought, well, I could look at the stars, I could do that.
Right.
And I got a D. And my father was like, oh my gosh, Dad, I got a D. He's like, oh, Siobhan, come on. Look at this pie your mother made. He's like, look, there's 65% of it left. That's a lot of pie left. Don't get down on yourself.
That's a positive spirit. I like Dad's point of view.
Yeah, it's like look at the cup, 7/8 full because you only got about 1/8
Yeah.
of brains on that side of your head.
Yeah. Storytelling is truly one of the gifts of being Irish. Every time I do a funeral and I say, how do you keep this person alive? I say, the Irish know there's no better way to keep them alive than by telling their story over and over again. Who's better than
Oh,
that? The
yes.
Irish. Now,
Yes.
Siobhan, for those who don't know, aside from the many talents I outlined in the introduction, now has a movie out that I'm hoping folks are going to see. Tell us about Shelter in Solitude. Tell us all about it and how we can also find out where to see it.
Yes. So it was in the AMC's and in the Regal theaters, but now people can watch it on Amazon or Apple or Vudu. I always think Amazon's the easiest way for, people
Yeah.
of my age. But anyway, it is a film about a prisoner on death row with 10 days left to live.
Mm.
But now, of course, we have to have some comedy in there. So I play a washed up country singer who is kind of a cougar wannabe. Am I allowed to say that in front of you?
You
And
are,
so,
yes.
so, but no one will have her, by the way. So I own a bar and, I'm just kind of, and I have pictures on the wall. I'm an egomaniac of all these performances. One performance I did in Nashville in 1996. So I'm like living in the past for that one performance.
Right.
Then Robert Patrick, who many people know is from the Terminator or
Right.
all of his good work. He's in the Yellowstone now. He plays the warden. And then Dan Castellaneta, who is the voice of Homer Simpson, he's an old friend of mine. He plays an old guard in it. So we have this amazing cast. And we have a 98% rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh, that's great.
So there's a lot of Catholicism because my character is, well, I actually just spoke at Catholic University. We showed the movie there Wednesday night. And my character really, you would think she's a loser. Like she
Hmm.
dresses too young, she drinks too much, she is, she's too much. And her bar
Yeah.
shuts down during COVID and there's an opening at the jail, but of course her brother wants no part of. So I take care of this prisoner for the last 10 days of his life. And um I've always had a devotion to Saint Therese, the Little Flower. And she basically that's her model in life.
Hmm.
That it's not told in the movie, but you'll see pictures of her. You see the Blessed Mother throughout the movie, and me saying the rosary, but swearing while doing it. Like, please bless my brother, he's such a blank, and bless his wife, she's such a blank. And as I'm grabbing the rosary, and my wine bottle tips over, and so does the blessed. Actually, my statue looks very much like the statue that you have behind you. And so
You
she's
can borrow
very
mine.
reading.
Mine hasn't broken. Okay, so you can have mine anytime.
She's very Mary Magdalene-esque. And so she's
Right.
doing everything in her power to make the last 10 days of this guy's life great. Of course, he wants nothing to do with her. But I just work on him and work on him and work on him until, he has no choice but to join in.
This is not sounding like the seriousness of Dead Men Walking, huh?
Well, a lot of people there, it is very serious. Well, the thing is, people laugh and then they cry because
Ah,
my character, she's sneaking cookies in, she's sneaking wine in, she's doing everything she can to make these last 10 days as great as possible. And then even she brings in a few Bible passages, which he wants no part of. And I say, I know. Listen, I'm Catholic. And let me tell you something. We don't really know scripture that well either. It's mainly the born again.
that's an admission we're not supposed to make. Okay, when I get on with these
I
Protestant
know.
ministers, they start saying, "Well, it's like John 16:4," and I say, "Yeah, hold on."
You're like Google. No, but Monsignor, growing up in upstate, my best friend was a born again Christian. So
uh,
I would go to youth group meetings with her, and I would get literally put on stand by some of these mothers. They'd be like, Siobhan, what do you believe in? And I'd be like, I believe in the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, and in Jesus Christ and I would just say the Apostles' Creed. I was like, you're not getting me. So anyway, so it's a combination of, well, the very odd, many odd juxtapositions, one of which is a Catholic who's a big drinker, kind of rough around the edges, dresses too young, living in the deep South with these born agains, and she's saying the rosary and spreading the word.
okay,
And then we've got the juxtaposition of the three people. So Robert Patrick, his character is this warden who's really rough around the edges and not a very nice guy, but he softens, which I won't give anything away, but
okay,
I work on him too. Then I'm obviously rough around the edges. And then the prisoner is an African American. I wanted to make sure when I wrote this that I was not the great white hope.
right, right,
He's the stellar human being in all of this.
okay.
And so it's three broken people that come together and, get down to the real basics, like St. Therese, like just doing the little things every day.
Siobhan, in explaining who you are at the beginning of the program, I was going through all your credentials, which are very impressive. But for our listeners and watchers, I want to introduce you to three other characters in her life: Bernadette, Peter, and Sinead. How did you manage to do all the creative art stuff you do and raise three amazing kids?
Well, I will tell you, I said to myself, they will be a part of my career and that's it. And
Hmm.
so I would say things like, like I did Charlotte's Web in Australia,
Right.
and then I did 3 movies in Denmark with Lars von Trier. And I'd be like, oh, now there's one other thing. In Screen Actors Guild, they have to fly you first class. And
Okay.
my mother and father were always like, Siobhan, you are such a con. I would be like, hey, how about I take that first class and turn it into some coach tickets?
Right.
So I'd bring them. Well, I had to fly to Australia first, uh, just for a week. And then I had to come home and go back for like 2 months. And I brought my sister with me, my sister Megan.
Okay.
And we were in business class because at that point I was only one other person coming. So I took that ticket and turned it. Well, anyway, we're in business class. I said to my sister Megan, She said, I'm going to go down and look at Coach. I go, let me know how it is. Not as if, by the way, as if I didn't know what Coach was like. I mean, I've flown Coach a lot,
Right.
but not on Qantas Airlines
Right.
with the kangaroo on the side of the
Yeah.
airplane. So she comes up and her face is white. At this time, my daughter Sinead was 2, my son was 5, and my daughter Bernadette was 8. And they were all going to be going to school over there. Even the 2-year-old, she'd go to a little preschool for like an hour or
Okay.
two a day. She comes up, her face is white. She says, let's just say it's the difference between the Mayflower and 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 a tugboat and the Queen Mary. I go, uh-oh. So anyway, but I would make them apart. I'd put them in school, or I would bring them everywhere I went, or I'd put them in the movie. Like I put my son in Baby Mama. I put
Oh,
my kids got in a fist fight in Charlotte's Web, and I remember the director was like, Siobhan, if your kids can't behave, they're out of this. They're out of there. And I'm like, you guys hold the slugs till they say cut, would you?
yeah.
But
How in
anyway, it
the
was very sorry.
how in the world do you though go onto a set and keep? Well, there's a husband in this story too. Does he come
Oh,
too?
yes, my husband Peter.
Yeah.
So he would, I used to beg him. I'd say, listen, I know a lot of people that they have stay-at-home dads. He's like, absolutely not. He's like a real New Yorker. He's like, no, he worked on the floor. He's like, absolutely not. However, now that we're older, he did produce both my films that I wrote with me, Rushed
Okay.
and Shelter and Solitude. So, so it's always been a crazy family affair. I mean, my
Right.
son is in Shelter and Solitude. He plays the young cop, and he was
Okay.
also the music supervisor. He got, well, you see, I was always like wing it, like, everything I've done is just wing it. And my son's like, Mom, you can't wing good country singers. So we need to get some good ones. So he was in the music business, and he got me Justin Bill Tonen from Three Doors Down,
Right.
who anybody who loves country music knows. So next thing you know, I'm flying out to Nashville to sing in a booth with him, and I'm like, okay, there's only one. Listen, there's just one thing. I
Right.
wanted to be a musical theater star, but I never got past the preliminary auditions because I can't sing that well. Next thing I'm saying, but my mother used to tell me, fake it till you make it. But the long and short of it is, my kids were always, and my faith, much more important to me than my career, or I was going to work them in.
Siobhan, you are a funny lady. I got to ask you though, a serious, not funny question. Why did you marry Peter? What were you seeing in him back then that made you say you're over 3 decades with the guy now? What did he have back then that made you say I can invest in this guy and build a family with him? I can build a life with him. What did he see in you? What did you see in him?
Okay, first I'm going to tell you, Monsignor, that um my father told me when I met Peter, because I called
Right.
my parents, I said, oh my gosh, I love this guy. Now we went to the same church. We both lived on the Upper West Side.
Okay.
So we went to Holy Trinity, and but I didn't know that he went to the same church. I was fixed up by my friend from Catholic U, PJ Clifton, who is also a producer on my films from many, many moons ago.
Okay.
And I called my father and my mother, because one would be on one line and one would be on the other, saying, hurry up, this call's expensive. And I'm like, I met this guy, I love him. And my father's like, okay, Siobhan, do you really like him? I said, yeah. He says, then hide your real personality for 3 weeks. And I did, because at this point I was 30, and I was like, hey, listen, being myself is not really working out right now. So I pretended I was, well, not shy, but I didn't talk that much. And I remember sitting on Columbus Avenue, and it was after church, we were having brunch. And I was just sort of sitting there with my hand on my hands and listening to him talk. And I was like, well, this is interesting. I guess this is what most girls do. And then I was thinking, I wonder how my head's looking like on my hand right now. And I hope he likes me. So anyway, but the truth is, he's from a family of 7, 4, all 6, the first 6 kids were right in a row. It's from Rockaway, Queens. I always, very Irish, part Norwegian, real family guy, uh, very, well, I remember the first Easter. We got engaged April 24th, and we flew down to Florida to see my parents. And I said to my mother, I think he's going to ask me to marry him. Anyway, we went to Good Friday at service,
Right. Service.
and
Right.
I turned, and he had tears in his eyes. And I was like, oh my gosh. And he's like, I always felt bad every now he says the way I do an imitation of him makes him sound like a moron. And he says, I always feel so bad every Good Friday because my name is Peter. And I'm like, oh my God. And I was like,
Wow.
he's a lot
Who
deeper
is
than I
this
am.
guy?
He's devout. He's deep and
Very
it,
sensitive.
very sensitive.
Yeah.
We got engaged on April 24th, 1992. We were supposed to get married the following April 24th. Memorial Day weekend is his birthday. And I said, why are we waiting till April? Why don't we just get married? Like, I don't know. So we got married in August. We only were engaged 4 months. Everyone thought I was with child, but I wasn't. And my sisters were like, what colored towels would you like? I was like, I don't care. You can pick them out. They're like, what kind of silver and Waterford? I was like, I don't care. What do you have? But I didn't care about any of that. But it was, and I'll never forget the day we got engaged. We drove to Rockaway and with his brother zooming in and out of traffic. And because his aunt Francine McManus is going to have a party for us. And I'm in the way in the car. I said, what should we name our kids? And he goes, okay, slow down. But yeah, it was, I mean, and listen, we're not perfect. And that's for my father said when we were in upstate one time, and my husband's notoriously late. Well,
Okay.
I was in the car packed with kids, hot day. We're jammed, I'm not a very good packer. Things are like poking me in the head. And I'm laying on the horn for my husband to please get in the car. He doesn't come, he doesn't care. I go in the house, and my father said, I don't know what to say. You married her. But he used to call us the honeymooners.
For our guests and our listeners around the world, Siobhan Fallon Hogan is a fascinating lady, and I could listen to her forever. But I really want to ask you this question too. You and your husband, so you're Good Friday services together. How much more Catholic can you be? Obviously, the
Right.
faith means a lot to the two of you. But here's the $4 million question that every parent and grandparent asks me, and maybe you have an answer. Three beautiful kids. How in the world do you pass this faith that you love onto them?
Okay. Well, I would go to Casanova every summer and
Okay.
I would run this Bible camp with these other mothers. It was ecumenical camp.
Okay.
And the kids, we would put on a skit at first with my kids and my sister's kids, cousins, to get really, well, I didn't really know it at the time, but to really drill home the messages and make it fun and make it, you know, important. Then my kids, we sent them to Catholic school, and I was always my other friend, whose name is also Siobhan from Queens. We were the head of the Faith and Action Committee.
Oh,
And we would say we're two disasters, but I would do I believe in bribery, so I'd have like a contest. I'd be like, okay, whoever learns the Hail Holy Queen gets a trip to the ice cream shop with us in 3 weeks. So, and of course, little kids be like, Hail Holy Queen, Mother of Mercy, and our life. I'd help them. But I made it, and believe me, and as they got older, I was like, hey, listen, you got nothing unless you get up and get to mass. I mean, I remember one time when I was a reader at church, and I was like, it was like the Beverly Hillbillies. I was like, I'm leaving you people. You're going to be late, and I would go, and then I look up, and they've all come in a different car, two different cars, and there's my daughter Sinead, who's now 22, with her hair. She looks like Janis Joplin, wearing a Nirvana t-shirt.
very good for her.
So I said to her afterwards, I didn't know Nirvana was Catholic. And I think he's probably gone out till about 5 in the morning. This was during college. And she said, well, he is now.
So they
But
got mommy sense of humor. Okay.
anyway, but I also like I will now, my daughter Bernadette, she's 29.
Hmm.
She's a newscaster in New York City. She worked for the New York Post.
Okay.
She's a political reporter. And my son Peter, he's 25. He lives in New Jersey. Sinead is now living with Bernadette, and she's working on a TV show. And I text them every Sunday, get your beep to mass.
And they probably do because it's better that than having to face mommy's wrath. Now,
Right. Or I say, you have a lot of gifts. Do not skip, get there.
Siobhan, let me ask you maybe a larger Catholic question is that Margaret Colin years ago, she went before the Congress to testify against cloning because that's what we teach. I'm
Yes.
thinking Kelly O'Hara was our guest, and she said, "Yeah, coming to New York from Oklahoma, it was kind of a secular environment, and religion wasn't warmly embraced by everybody." So she said it's been a little tough being a public Catholic. You're right out there. You don't hide the fact that not only are you Irish, but you're Irish Catholic. Have you ever had any blowback from people who say, "A person of faith? What the heck's the matter with you? Aren't you a thinking woman?"
Listen, since the beginning of my career, have, I don't value celebrities in a
Yeah,
way. Like, I don't, look up, or I don't get nervous because
yeah,
I thought the funniest person I ever met was my father.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I knew I'd have to deal with him on every decision I had to make.
yeah.
And I also was like, I taught English as a second language before I started doing well in my career. I hate it when
Mhm.
people say before did you, has so and so made it? Like it's so stupid. So I was in LA and for only for 2 years. Boy, did I not fit in there. But I had a one-person show and I taught English as a second language. And my students were all Hispanic
Mm,
in one class and Japanese in another. There was this program that Ronald Reagan had that if he would pay you to go, if these people could better themselves, they could go for free. Anyway, I remember one time I got down to the end for this new Carol Burnett show. And I was I was definitely gloating. I said to the kids, oh, they weren't kids. They were 18 to like 27 years old. And but they had lived lives, they had children because their culture, let them get, they were, get married sometimes 15, 16. And they were panicked that I wasn't married. I was like 28. And I had this student, Stella, from Venezuela, and she was beautiful and really classy. And anyway, there's two parts of the story, which was how everyone, I will not be in class tomorrow. I'm down to the end for the Carol Burnett show. And all the hands go up, and someone said, who is Carol Burnett?
Siobhan Fallon Hogan is our guest. And one more time, too, before we went even near the end, I want you to tell people your movie is out online now on places like Amazon. Tell us about how we can find and watch the movie.
Yes. So Shelter in Solitude is now available on Amazon, Apple, iTunes, Vudu. I have another film called Rushed, which is about that I wrote about a Catholic family from upstate, and the son goes off to college, and there's a fraternity hazing incident. That's a thriller. That's also on
Okay.
Amazon, Apple, all those different platforms. But
Okay.
I want to say, Monsieur, it's so important that the Catholics get out and support
Yeah.
movies like this.
Right.
They're not uh faith-based in the sense that we know Hallmark or sort of,
Yeah.
I never could relate to goody goodies because I wasn't a goody goody, but these are people that are of great faith. I'll never forget once in Breezy Point, this priest said the greatest Catholic he knew was his nephew who was a drug addict.
Mm,
And that meant so much to me. It was like, you can be the most faithful, but you're flawed in the human eyes, but in the eyes of God,
right.
you might be the most rough around the edges, sort of mockable, not a stellar, what society thinks is great,
Yeah.
but be so, so beautiful in the eyes of.
There's a line in the one of the prayers we say, one of the mass texts that says, "To you, Lord, and to those whose faith only you alone know." And I think God has an insight into the soul. I promised last question to one, but I've been doing this interview stuff one way or another for my whole life. And one
That's
of the
great.
first guys I ever did was the film director Frank Capra. It's a Wonderful Life,
Oh,
and
wow.
he used
That's
to say all
amazing.
the time, people think physical illness is the worst thing, but it's not. Discouragement, he said, is
Oh,
the worst thing. And I got to ask you, because you come across, as you know, in this
oh,
interview as also and elsewhere, you're hopeful, you're happy, you're upbeat, you see the absurdity of life, and it doesn't overwhelm you. So, in this divided, crazy culture of ours,
oh.
how does Siobhan Fallon Hogan keep hope and joy alive?
Well, I tell kids, college kids, I tell my own kids, I say, first of all, if you're going to go into this business, the biggest gift you need is to be able to pull yourself out of being down in the dumps when there's dry periods. And there are dry periods. I was in California and I was losing hope.
Mm.
And I said to my mother, Mom, I think I have cancer causing stress. And she said, Siobhan, I was taught not to be too inner directed, but to be outer directed.
Uh,
You need to go volunteer because there are a lot of people that have it much worse than you do. So I
Wow.
did. I went and volunteered at the teen canteen where runaways would come. They'd be out all night. They'd come in with like hickeys all over their neck. They'd be a disaster. And they were, by the way, I ended up getting every penny of my I think I had $5,000 to my name, which I had saved for this one woman show, stolen from my bank account because I was so stupid. I would call the bank and I go, "Hi, could you tell me my balance? Yeah, my account's 079." And some of these kids were street smart, or as they say in Queens, street smart. And so, but thank God that they had insured, the bank gave it back to me. I was able to do the one woman show. But my point is, I always think clearly someone's got it worse than I do. I remember at the end of my dad's life, he was said, "Siobhan, his whole life, whatever happens, I'm never doing dialysis." Well, of course he did at the end. So sometimes I'll just think about people that are sitting in dialysis, or I try to go to mass as much as I can in the morning and just say, this is your plan. And and also so much great, as you know, comes out of the lows. Like I wouldn't have written my movies if I wasn't unemployed. And I was getting,
Those fallow periods. Yes. Yeah.
let's just say I was caught between young mother and we don't know what. You know what I mean? When you start getting scripts that say things like, "She's got a lot of city miles on her face. She's seen a lot of life." You're like, "Oh, is this for me? Whoops."
Shelter in Solitude is the movie, but most importantly, I hope that our listeners and watchers have enjoyed. Siobhan, you are a gift to us, and
You're
I
a
agree with
gift.
you. It's wonderful that people support movies like yours because it tells a great story with a Catholic perspective, if not, over the head hitting you with a bat. And more importantly, that we share a journey together. And I'd love people to see that
Yes.
your creative journey has led you to make truly wonderful movies. And I want people to support you. So for my friends out there, please, Amazon.com, as she suggested, is the best way to watch the movie, but support this beautiful woman in her creative genius and her joy and her hope. And thank you so much for being on Personally Speaking.
Thank you so much. I'm so humbled. God bless you. And I just cannot thank you enough for having me on.
As we end today's program, I want to thank you all for being with us. If you need to reach me, you can do that at personallyspeakingpodcast@gmail.com. We're also, you're probably listening to this on Sirius XM, the Catholic channel, but if you want to watch the program, we're on YouTube. You can search under Personally Speaking with Monsignor Jim Lisante. We're also on Facebook at Personally Speaking with Monsignor Jim Lisante and on Instagram at Personally Speaking Podcast. Please share and tell your friends and family about our program. I've been privileged to serve as host and executive producer of Personally Speaking. Our producer is Lisa Jandovitz. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll be with you again next time on Personally Speaking.